So as Friday comes to a close, I thought I'd go over some of the stuff that came out today so we're not clumping them up in the other preview videos later this weekend and going into the beginning of the week. So let's start off here with the Caustic Bronco that's on screen for 1 and a black 2/2 Snake Horse mount. Whenever it attacks, reveal the top card of your library and put it in your hand. You lose life equal to the mana value if you didn't saddle this thing before you swung with it. If you saddle it, each opponent, sorry, I missed that, loses life instead equal to the mana value. So this one's kind of an interesting card because if you can make it unblockable, you can kind of do this over and over again. Saddle it up, swing, and blast your opponents. On top of that, it's kind of cool because then if you can stack your deck with either Scries or Surveil cards or like say a Brainstorm or something like that to just restack the top of your deck with something really big, then you can do that over and over and over again and just repeatedly blast them and make sure that you're going to get something that's going to hit them for damage as you go along. This one's kind of an interesting card. I would keep an eye on it just to see if maybe it catches on, and it might actually see more play in the 60 card formats over a commander, but we'll see. Then we have a new Simic legendary card here, Doc Orlock, Grizzled Genius for a blue and a green. You get a 2/3 Bear Druid that says spells you cast from your graveyard or from exile cost 2 less to cast. Plotting cards from your hand cost 2 less. So this helps with the new plot mechanic to put them into exile. It will also help you if you're casting spells that are foretold out of exile or things that have been hit with a spell that makes your stuff cost more from exile. So this will actually reduce those down by 2. And if you're flashing back spells from your graveyard, this also helps with flashback costs from the graveyard. So this is kind of a cool card. I don't know about building a commander around the abilities, but it is kind of cool to have in the 99 of some of your decks that are in the Simic color spectrum. Then we have the next Join Up card with Rakdos Joins Up for 3, a black and a red. You get a legendary enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever a legendary creature you control dies, Rakdos Joins Up deals damage equal to the creature's power to target opponent. Now, I could see something with this, but you're not going to get a ton out of this other than just a reanimation spell for the most part. The one player that I saw online talking about this was actually a Joda commander with Joda the Unifier, wanting to use this as a wipe protection basically for their deck. That's about the only place I could see this really seeing any play other than just as a straight reanimation spell. The secondary part of this spell just doesn't really do much outside of decks like the Joda here. Next up is Blood Hustler here for 1 and a black. It's a 1/1 vampire rogue that whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability only triggers once a turn, and then you pay 3 and a black. Target opponent loses 1 life. You gain 1 life, i.e., you're going to be committing a crime to trigger the ability. Now, we have lots of ways that we've talked about before about committing crimes. I can see a deck in 60 card or even in Commander where the deck isn't really caring about the creature type of being a vampire rogue so much, but as looking for either committing crimes or maybe for the Outlaws deck since this is a rogue. There's different things that this could see featured in, and I kind of want to see where this one goes. This one can get pretty big pretty quick if you have a way to repeatedly, attacking somebody's graveyard, pinging somebody, whatever you have in your deck. This could get really big pretty quick. Then we have a card that would actually fit in well with Rakdos the Muscle. It's a Laughing Jasper Flint for 1, a black and a red. It's a 4/3 lizard rogue that says creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to their other types of making them outlaws. And at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards, and mana of any type can be used to cast those spells. So Rakdos the Muscle is like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice stuff and I'm going to exile cards off the top of somebody's library, whether it's your own or your opponent's. So this gives you another redundancy for the most part about that, and also fits well with a different variation on the Outlaws deck. Like so far, most of the Outlaws support has looked like you're just trying to build up a bunch of like mercenary tokens and just do random outlaws together and just attack with them, almost in the vein of how the Pirates decks in the past have been put together. Now this instead is set up where Rakdos is more about screwing with your opponent's deck and stealing the stuff from them to use for your own purposes, which I kind of like with the whole Outlaws thing going on because you're robbing your opponents. So it's kind of a cool flavor win as well. So this I like. I might try this either as the front face of a Rakdos deck doing that, or with Rakdos the Muscle up front and him in the 99. We'll see how that works out. Then we have everybody's favorite monkey pirate. It's Breaches the Blast Maker. For one, a blue and a red. It's a 3/3 goblin pirate with menace that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you can sacrifice an artifact, and if you do, you flip a coin. If you win the flip, you get to copy the spell. If you lose the flip, you deal damage equal to the converted mana cost or mana value in this case of the spell that was cast when you did all the coin flipping stuff. So it's a weird way to go ahead and see if you can either flip a coin or blast somebody in the face. Sometimes if you build the deck just right, your opponent may want you just to copy the spell and get two of whatever you're doing rather than, blasting them for something. Because if you have like a damage tripler like City on Fire on the board or something like that, this could really do some damage. Then we have the newest Spree spell. It's a white one. It has a cost of 4 and a white. You get to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So white is going to get their own rare version of Rise from the Grave in that variation mode. For 3 and a white, you get to either return a target mount or vehicle card from the graveyard to the battlefield, or also 3 and a white, you can return target aura or equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to a creature you control. There's some options here with this card that can work out. I mean, mostly you're probably going to be wanting to bring back one of your threats that got downed. But if you got something else that got blown up or you got discarded to some kind of effect or whatever, this could work out well as being a quite flexible reanimation spell. Now, if you're into big dumb monsters, this card might be actually up your alley, and that is Cactus Folk Sure Shot for 2 red green. It's a 4/4 plant mercenary with reach, ward 2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, all the other creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain haste and trample until end of turn. If you need ways to punch your big creatures through because they're just stalling you with chump blocks or whatever, this is a great way to stop that from happening, and I love this card. I can't wait to try it in some of my red-green decks. And then here she is straight out of the story. It's Ariat the Beguiler. For 1, a white, a blue, and a black. You get a human warlock 4/4 with lifelink. Whenever an aura you control becomes attached to a non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the aura's mana value, gain control of that permanent for as long as the aura is attached to it. So what I like about this card is it is not tied to Ariat existing on the board. You don't have to have it on there in order to actually keep the creature. If they blow her up, you still keep the creature because the aura, the game looks at the trigger, timestamps it, and goes, okay, that aura is there. And once the aura leaves, then they get the stuff back if the creature wasn't destroyed in the process of removing said aura. Now, with that said, I did a quick glance at like auras that are in the Esper color scheme. There's not a lot of stuff out there for this to use because unfortunately for us, most auras that are good that you want to put on stuff does one of two things. It either takes control of the creature or it pins it down with like a pacifism style effect so they can't attack you. Well, doing that means then you can't do anything with it either unless you're just stealing it for some kind of activated ability. So I'm not sure how well this card's going to work other than using like auras that actually pump up creatures, using those on your opponent's stuff and granting double strike, hitting stuff up. So I'm not sure about this card. It could be good, but I'm kind of on the fence on this one. Now we have a card that could have been straight out of the upcoming Bloomborough set in the fall. Claim Jumper for 2 and a white. It's a rabbit mercenary 3/3 with vigilance. When Claim Jumper enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more land than you can search your library for a plains card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then if an opponent still controls more lands than you get to repeat the process one more time. Search it, shuffle, do all the good stuff. So you get to get 2 lands off of this if 2 of your opponents or even the same opponent had ramped ahead of you. You can ramp back 2 lands off of this thing, and it's a 3/3 for 3, so it's got a good sized body attached to it, and you're able to catch back up with your opponents, especially if against these ramping decks with green in them. So I like this card. It's going to see a lot of play in Commander, I think, and this might even see play in some mid-range white decks if those things actually exist in Standard. So let's see what happens with this one. Then we have a card that everybody is going absolutely nuts about, and I can see why after looking at a few cards I want to mess around with thing. It is Archmage's Newt for 1 and a blue, 2/2 Salamander Mount. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. This flashback cost is equal to the mana cost, but that card gains flashback of 0 if you saddled it when you attacked with it, and it saddles for 3. So, a 2/2 for 2 is, whatever. It's a grizzly bear. It's not very easy to keep alive. However, there are good ways to make these things lockable. So let's go with something like to the City. Discard a card up to one target creature can't be blocked this turn. Now, what's cool about Key to the City is it fuels this thing by putting something in the graveyard that you're going to want to flash back anyways. So let's activate this, make it unblockable. Let's pitch I don't know, a Time Warp to it. And then you could Time Warp for 0 as long as you saddled this thing up, and then do it again and just keep pitching things into this. You can actually chain like time spells over and over and over again for free, essentially, as long as the newt lives and you have something to saddle up to this thing every time you do it. So this card could get really stupid really fast depending on how you build a deck with it in there. Then we have a card that standard players are kind of looking at and salivating that there's a black combo kill in the deck, and that is Rush of Dread. For 1 black is the base cost. So for 2 black, target opponent sacrifices half the creatures they control rounded up. So that's pretty good. For 3 black, target opponent discards half the cards in their hand rounded up. Pretty decent. Then also for 3 black, target opponent loses half their life rounded up. That is the one that has everybody excited. And why is that? Well, that's because of this card, Bloodletter of Aclazotz. Now, you can use this, Rush of Dread, then they lose half their life rounded up, and then they would, at the end step, they're going to lose life equivalent to what they lost. So if they lost 10 life, they're going to lose another 10 life, and in a 20 life format, they're dead. So that's why they're getting a little excited. You could also do this in legacy formats with Wound Reflection, where they lose life equal to the amount of life they've lost this turn. So there's some different things that they could do. Now, I will say there is ways to get around like things like Wound Reflections and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how to go about this. Like, because if they have an instant speed life gain or whatever, they can get away from the combo. But there's going to be some people surprised and they're going to just drop dead all of a sudden for no reason just because they got too carded with this thing. So I think it's kind of funny. Then we have another card that I couldn't find a clean non-foreign copy of, so I found a Japanese copy and removed the old copy off of it and just put the text in there. This is Pitiless Carnage. For 3 and a black sorcery. Sacrifice any number of permanents you control, draw that many cards, and it plots for 1 black. So we've seen a card like this before many, many years ago in the form of Reprocess, which came out of the Urza Saga set originally, and it was reprinted in a couple of core sets too. 2 black sorcery. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, creatures, or lands. Draw a card for each one. Sacrifice this way. Can't talk right now. Pitiless Carnage is a little bit better because you can do any permanent spell. That includes enchantments, that includes planeswalkers, battles, whatever you control. So there's some differences here that are slightly better than what Reprocess does. And you can plot this so you can kind of time it a little bit better by having it out of the field, though your opponent then knows what you're up to. Whereas if you do it from your hand, they don't know what's going on. But if you're drawing, the cards and then you have mana available, then you can cast off of this a little bit easier than if you could with Reprocess or just hard casting the Pitiless Carnage. So there's some functionality here. Decent card. Not sure how much play it's going to see, but I like it. So we might give this one a try, especially if we have a way to use it to kill with an aristocrat style pingers deck of some sort in Rakdos or Orzhov. Next up, we have another legendary mount card. This is Calamity Galloping Inferno. It's a 4 and 2 red horse mount, 4/6 with haste. That says whenever it attacks while saddled, choose a non-legendary creature that's saddled at this turn and create a tapped and attacking token copy of it. Sack the token at the beginning of the next end step. Repeat this process once. So that means you get to, grab something, copy it with the attack, and then it'll copy it again. And then at the beginning of the end step, both copies will be destroyed. But there is a card, and I was trying to figure out how well to make this work. This works really well with a card we just talked about yesterday, and that is Girad, Mirror of the Wilds. You're going to create a token copy of something you've got on the board that's non-legendary, and then you can use Girad to go ahead and make a copy of one of the tokens, and you get to keep that copy because you're making a copy of it, and it does not maintain the Calamity trigger that makes them sacrifice at the end of the turn. So like a Girad Mirror of the Wilds deck will probably want to have Calamity Galloping Inferno in the 99 of the deck. Now, this one was revealed a couple days back, but I could not find anything that was decent enough resolution to even lift the text off of and try to reset. So I had to wait until a clean copy came out. And that is another round for XX2 and a white. It's a sorcery. Exile any number of creatures you control, and then return them to the battlefield under the owner's control. Repeat this process X more times. So you get to, for every 2 that you pay into the X, you get to select a creature, or you get any number of your creatures, and you flicker them however many times you've paid into the X. That's how this works. So what kind of good stuff do we want to try to flicker? Well, we could start off, with real basic with like Solemn Simulacrum. You flicker it out, say you pay, 3 X's. So you're going to pay 6, 7, 8 and a white. You get to flicker that Solemn Simulacrum 3 times and get 3 lands out of it. Or you can do something really silly with Adarian, Gorion's Ward. That's a mouthful. For 4 and a white, human that comes into play as a 4/4. And when it enters the battlefield, you exile any number of non-land permanents you control until it leaves the battlefield. Create a 1/1 white soldier token for each permanent exiled this way. So you're going to flicker it out, and then your stuff will come back. So you can actually use this as a way to like float mana too. So you can like float mana, flicker it back in. It takes your lands back out of play. You flick it back in. You keep doing this over and over, and you create a bunch of white soldiers. And then the last one, you just choose, whatever amount of stuff you want to have exiled. If maybe nothing at that point, you might just leave everything on the battlefield. And then you get to go ahead and just do this thing and do just absolutely busted stuff. And there's all kinds of stuff you want to mess around with when in terms of enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield type triggers that would work really well with this particular spell. And the last card I want to talk about today is the Obeka Splitter of Seconds card for 1, a blue, a black, and a red. It's a 2/5 Ogre Warlock with Menace. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. So right now at base, it's 2 additional upkeeps that you get, and then it'll jump back to your second main phase. If you pump her up, you get more of these things. And what would we do with extra upkeep phases? Well, let's take a look at some cards here. Let's take a look at Call of the Ring. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring's going to tempt you, so you get more ring temps. You make stuff into legends. But the big thing here is when you choose the ring bearer, you get to pay 2 life and draw a card. So you can do that to draw extra cards off of it and get your ring temptations up really quickly with the card. Or maybe we want something like this. Relissa Rail Kingpin. Now, this one's interesting because this one it gives you the initiative. Well, initiative lets you venture into the dungeon, and then every upkeep you venture deeper into the dungeon at the beginning of the upkeep. So if you get multiple upkeeps, you're going to churn through that dungeon really freaking fast. And if you get to the end of the dungeon on this particular card that's on the screen, you get to give a creature +5/+0 and death touch it gains death touch until end of turn. And if you completed a dungeon, it also gets +5/+0, first strike, and menace until end of turn. So it makes it harder to block because you got to do 2. It has death touch. It has first strike, so it's going to smash whatever it runs into unless they're indestructible. And then if she gets +5/+0, it's 7 extra upkeep triggers coming off of Obeka. And if you have a way to make her unblockable, well, yeah, you're going to get a lot of upkeep triggers. So what else are we going to want to mess with? Let's take a look at one of the court cards, Court of Locthwain, that came in the Wilds of Eldraine set. 4 mana, you become the monarch when it comes into play, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of an opponent's library, and you can play that card as long as it remains exiled and for any mana type. Or if you're the monarch, you get to cast it for free. So if you have a way to get them, like you're going to hit with Obeka first. So if you hit the person that has the monarch, if you're not already the monarch, you become the monarch. You get these extra extra upkeep phases, and then you get to just cast their stuff for free. So that one's a fun one. Or how about Court of Embereth? Same kind of concept, but you create 3/1 red knight tokens, and then if you're the monarch, it deals X damage to each opponent equal to the number of creatures you control. So if you get to chain these up and do multiple upkeeps, you get to make a bunch of 3/1 red knights, and you get to blast your opponents in the face for the damage. Or we can get extra ultra spicy with one of my favorite cards, and that is Descent into Avernus. 2 in a red enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put 2 descent counters on this thing, and then you create X treasure tokens, and descent deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of descent counters on this thing. If you chain multiple upkeeps into a descent into Avernus, the game is going to end very quickly if they don't get rid of this thing, because you're going to end up burning everybody to death. And the first person that gets burned is you, but as long as you're surviving through it, then your opponents are also going to just get burned every time. Just blam, 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 blam. It's so stupid of a card. You just got to be careful with it because you are giving them treasures to work with, but it does speed the game up. So if you're up for a fast game, put this in the card, or put this in the card, put this in the deck with Obeka, and it will be a lot of fun and very fast. With that said, this is what I have for you guys today. If you like what I'm doing here, please like, comment, share, subscribe. All those things help the channel grow as I'm on my way to my first 1,000 subs. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.